this is the thing that's going to allow me to heal. And this is the thing that keeps me going.
Because there are all rules our mind makes for ourselves when you like look into them for a second or batch it.
There's been these brewing issues that have all just like come to a head as I'm in the middle of recovering from a wisdom tooth extraction, whatever. So it's like it's all very much right here, and I can't just ignore things.
Maybe I can sit down and do something really intentional and really beautiful and really heartfelt in this moment. But if I just show up, even if I just acknowledge the project, like if I just go to it and give it a couple of words or give it a little edit or just read it over every day, like I can keep it ticking over and I can keep that momentum going. I can keep feeding it until I'm able to functionally actually go back to it with my heart. But if I ignore it, when I go back to it, we might not know each other anymore.
Welcome back to Art Therapy, the 12-week series in which Veronica and I work our way through the Artist's Way course. The Artist's Way is a book by Julia Cameron, designed to heal our relationship with childlike, boundless creativity and to teach us to use our creativity to live a richer and freer life. This was the 5th week of our weekly check-ins, and both of us were struggling a little with life and its constant chaos. We discussed how to be compassionate to ourselves in hard times, the value of showing up imperfectly, the importance and empowering nature of naming our frustrations, and what it means to create within the chaos of life.
You look fabulous. I love that you look like the sun, and I need this energy.
Listen, we're in our flop week. It had to come eventually.
I mean, my shirt is not happy and sunny. It's Johnny Cash giving the middle finger, which is absolutely how I feel right now. So
as long as you're being true to yourself. So to the people at home, welcome to the flop era edition of The Artist's Way. All right, I'll start off by reading the intro to the chapter, although I'm not entirely sure. Well, maybe it is relevant. I'll keep an open mind.
Yeah.
So the theme of week 5 is recovering a sense of possibility. This week, you are being asked to examine your payoffs in remaining stuck. You will explore how you curtail your own possibilities by placing limits on the good you can receive. You will examine the cost of settling for appearing good instead of being authentic. You may find yourself thinking about radical changes, no longer ruling out your growth by making others the cause of your constriction. So how have you been?
Oh, I've been better. I already spoken to Ferga about what's going on in my life. Things are a little up in the air. I do think that it's very interesting from a synchronicity standpoint because, I recently just got a wisdom tooth out. There is craziness going on in my apartment. I might be moving, I might not be moving, so I don't really know what's going on at this moment in time. It's interesting though because some of the issues that we've been having with our apartment, we've been having for a long time. And I have noticed in doing this work, and now like there's been these brewing issues that have all just like come to a head as I'm in the middle of recovering from a wisdom tooth extraction, whatever. So it's like it's all very much right here, and I can't just ignore things anymore. And I've realized that it's almost like we knew we should have moved a long time ago, and yet I almost feel like I don't deserve to move. Like the sense of wanting different things, better things, like improving my life and not having to live the way that we've been having to live in some regards. I noticed that like I almost have this limiting belief where it's like, who do you think you are wanting to live in a place that doesn't deal with A, B, C, and D? And like, I don't really want to talk about exactly what's going on publicly, but like, it's things where I would never expect anybody else to live like that. And I would never want that for anybody else. So why is it like, oh my gosh, I would feel so horrible if anybody else had to go through it. But I believe that I deserve to live like this. And it's wrong for me to want more or, not even more, but just different, like just to not want to deal with this anymore. It's like, oh, okay, Miss Fancy Pants.
So you don't have to tell the people at home what they are, but I can tell you guys, it's reasonable stuff. basic, like human rights living space kind of stuff. There is a lot of stuff this week about, there was, you had to kind of fill out sentences. So the sentence might start, I wish, and you had to write 10 sentences starting with I wish and stuff like that. And what I was thinking about as I was doing it is that for me, it might be an illness thing, I don't know, but I feel very uncomfortable wishing. Actually, I don't mind having hopes and all that kind of stuff, dreaming, but this idea of being unsatisfied, I think it's kind of maybe a little bit like what you were saying, this idea of being unsatisfied, this idea of sitting down and saying, I wish it wasn't like this, I wish it was like this, really makes me uncomfortable.
Mm.
It's like this idea of like everything should start with a place of acceptance and move from there, I think is very much how I try to deal with stuff. So these things that were like this week, kind of having to do all of these prompts and questions with myself, that started off with basically the assumption of like, this frustrates me, I don't like this, I wish this was different, like all that kind of stuff was really interesting. And I think what you were saying about how like these are things you kind of knew, but maybe through doing the course they've become less acceptable to you. Like I wonder, like, how was that process for you? Did you feel like the questions this week kind of led you towards confronting more of your like frustrations?
Yeah, totally. I think that, yeah, it almost feels like if I acknowledge that I'm unhappy, that means that I'm ungrateful. That means that I'm like, the word that keeps coming to mind is prissy for me. And I don't know
Interesting.
where I got that from, because no one's ever called me that. I don't really call other people that. Like, I don't know why that's coming up, but it's like, oh, you're just being prissy. Like, you're just not being grateful for what you already have. And that definitely is something that I struggle with, where like, how is it okay to have a gratitude practice where you're like, my life is so abundant and I love everything, and there is so much for me to be grateful for. But then if I realize that it's like, I'm not happy in this one area and like wishing for something else, then it's like, you're prissy, you don't deserve that, hey, there's people who have much less than you and you should be grateful for what you have. But I also think, in regard to what you were saying, it's very interesting hearing that it's challenging for you to wish for things, because you also talk a lot about loving your fantasies and living in these
Mm.
fantasies. So I'd be curious for you to talk to us more about that. Like, how do you balance that?
I think the maybe subtle and ridiculous delineation I would make, or that my mind is making when I
Uh-huh.
set up these rules for myself, because they're all rules our mind makes for ourselves when you like look into them for a second or batch it. So I think sometimes a lot of where my kind of elaborate fantasy life comes from is this like elaborate way to justify whatever's going on in the present. So,
Mm.
for example, if I'm having a really rough time, um specifically maybe in eras where things were, I didn't have a lot of like agency and power over what was going on day to day, being bedridden or whatever, like it was very useful to me to project into the future and be like, this is going to create, like this is where it is now, but where the story's going, like it's all going to be fine in the future because I'm on my journey. Like and
Right.
actually me being bedridden now is why I'm going to be able to be doing this thing in the future. Like it's all part of this epic hero's journey story. I feel like wishing is the opposite of that. Like fantasizing in that moment for me was like, it's okay that I'm sick because I'm not always going to be sick, because I'm going to be, in a few years, everything will be totally fine and everything will have worked out. And I'll be so grateful for the journey. Wishing would have been being there and being like, I wish I wasn't sick right now.
Mm.
And I feel like maybe, and I feel like we're at a low ebb, so I'm just going to be super real. I feel like maybe I think it would have been too painful for me to have that thought. It's much easier for me to do these elaborate justifications for everything, to be like, this is actually why this is fine, than to have to. I think it's very scary, probably for all of us, to actually say, I don't like the way something is right now. And some people are better at it. And I think we all have, you can be too far one way or the other. Some people are very comfortable complaining and that can get them stuck in a different way. But I feel like for me, it's like this thing of like, I'll make up these elaborate stories for why it's okay. And that in itself is an acknowledgement that I don't want things to stay like this. But I can't admit that something is, I can't admit that I wish it was different, because that's almost like admitting defeat or something.
Yeah, so it's almost like fantasy is hopeful, whereas wishing the present were different almost feels hopeless.
Yes, but I also think because I was asked to do this week, and because I was doing these wishing things, it was uncomfortable, and it was also very cathartic, because it kind of cuts the bullshit, you know what I mean? And sometimes it's good to realize that you're very upset about something and you're not hopeful about it, and you just have to, and you can just sit in that for a moment. So my flop week, the context of my flop week.
I wanted to hear about this. If you're comfortable sharing, please tell us all about it.
If you've been watching our series up until now, you'll know that in the first episode I mentioned that there was a very significant death in my family in January, and I spent January in Dublin, and then I came back here end of January and had a really nice February. I was throwing myself into the Artist's Way course. I was seeing friends. I got a job. More on that later. Really exciting. I was, going on this whole journey you've been going on with us. I was dressing more playfully. I was wearing a tiara. It was all groovy. And then at the top of this week, the grief just hit me. It just hit me like a wave. And I've been really going through it in Ireland. And then here I was just able to kind of get into the life here for a while. And it's just been very almost debilitating. Like I really have been trying so hard each day to keep up all of my practices and to keep up the work I'm doing for myself and for other people and to keep up my creativity and everything. But it's just been a lot. It's been really sad. And the other thing about it that I just to kind of parlay it back into the creativity conversation, because I think it's relevant, is I think what's interesting is that sometimes when and it might be, you might feel this as well with this week as well, like when you put in the work, when you decide I'm going to take 12 weeks out of my life and commit to something like this creativity thing, or like my writing course that I'm doing at the same time, it can be so hard to accept when life gets in the way, because you kind of feel like, I don't know, like I actually wrote this down. I'm going to consult my notes app, because I had this like strange feeling of like, even though this is a horrible, horrible thing to have happened, and makes so much sense that I'm not functioning super well this week, and it makes so much sense that the book, the writing, which was coming so easily to me last week and which was so fun and such a crutch and such a self-care thing last week, and just something that was so giving me so much joy, like that it absolutely, like I couldn't get a word out this week. I was just so unable to get my brain moving in that way, and it was so hard for me to be compassionate with myself about that. And I think it's because I just really was enjoying this being an era of productivity for me, and I was enjoying this being my like prolific era. And similar to wishing, anger is a little uncomfortable for me. And I had this crazy blurt that I will share because I think it's quite real. So we had to sort of finish a sentence as one of the Artist's Way things. And one of the sentences started with something I would be angry about if I let myself feel it. And what came up was like, I'm really angry that this very legitimate, very important grief is happening. I mean, I'm angry it's happening at all, but I'm angry it's happening in a year that was like, I feel in my bones supposed to be a fun year. And like, I was thinking about like, I have been unable to live this part of myself out, to fully embrace the creativity, fully embrace the dreams, fully embrace all these things I've been working for so long, because in part of like shame and fear and all the stuff we were talk about in the Artist's Way course, and also because of my health problems. And now I'm like healthier than I've been in a decade, and I'm working through all of the blocks. And I don't know, like in a silly way, I'm just kind of like, really?
My God, I feel that. I feel that on a spiritual level.
I think it's interesting because the more I kind of journaled about that or whatever as part of our exercises, I was thinking about like this idea of like a good era and a bad era and in
Yeah.
our lives, and how so often in life, I mean, this is a little extreme, but so often in life it's a mix of the two. And I think we were talking about this as well, because I was really commending you for like taking time to come on this Zoom and sticking with this course, like even because your life has been chaos and like you don't have a tooth, like everything's just a mess.
I lost my wisdom. I don't know what to do.
I think it's also really funny because we're like doing like embracing the inner child stuff, and then you were just like, out goes the wisdom teeth. Like on one level, when things get nuts, the beauty, I mean, these practices and these, I mean, both our creativity and also this kind of mindset work kind of stuff that like the Artist's Way, these courses that are to do with your own development, they're not for they're not for like a life that's taking place in a bubble. Like you kind of feel like you should be able to do it like in a retreat in a meadow, you know what I mean? But actually, like it's a real life handbook. Like it's supposed to be the things you do it's supposed to kind of be the thing that makes the hard times easier.
Exactly.
And yet at the same time, it can feel so frustrating because it can be hard to hold those two ideas in your head at once. It's hard to feel like I'm really sad, but I'm also more confident and freeing myself, and I'm being, doing this inner work, but I'm also profoundly engaged in more like collective things right now. And I'm trying to like stay in contact with family and friends in a deeper way than maybe you might in other periods, because we're going through this together. And like, yeah, I don't know. I think that's interesting.
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm really sorry. Again, grief is not easy. It's really not. And I commend you for maintaining your creative practice. And I think that's such a great outlook on everything, is like it would be so easy for both of us. And I don't think anybody would even shame us for saying, you know what, this is all a bit too much, and we just have to take a break. And you know what, we'll always have that option. But I think that it's really pretty great that your mind goes to, but this is the thing that's going to allow me to heal, and this is the thing that keeps me going. This is the light that guides me forward even in these times of darkness. And that's really what creativity is. And I think, like, especially as adults, when more and more things keep happening, you're not in a bubble anymore. I mean, I everybody grew up differently, but it's like when you're a kid and your main priorities are go to school, get whatever grades your parents expect from you, your teachers expect from you, and just don't get into too much trouble. And it's like now it's like there's financial burdens, there's social burdens, there's the fact that we're getting older and we lose people, and and it's like there's all these different things where, yeah, totally, sometimes that's how life can feel, is, oh my gosh, when can I catch a break? It's always something. And I've had a lot of influences in my life who have said, I wanted to do this, but then my life just got too chaotic and I never did it. I wanted to do that, but life just had other plans. And there was always this like throwing in the towel mentality. I think it's still like being able to find that meadow when you're not in a meadow, like a little mental meadow of like, even if it's 2 minutes, I'm just gonna just do this.
Yes. Yeah. I also think it's a great example of like why this work is so much easier with other people. Like this accountability, the idea of like, I have to do all this journaling and all of this thinking and all of this self-excavation because I have a Zoom at 6 p.m. on Thursday. Like, and I can't show up without my homework done. Like
Right.
that just keeps you so on message. And I also feel like, I mean, going into this year, both of us were very, I think, on a similar page to like consistency being a major focus for both of us. And as I was saying to you before, I have this like, I'm trying not to watch things and listen to podcasts and whatnot this year.
Right.
And it's funny because this week I was just like, I am in like, I'm in a little depression cave. Like, would it kill me to like listen to like Super Soul just for like an hour? And I was like, in theory, no, that would be totally fine. That would be super valid. And if it was any other year, and if I was, if I hadn't specifically made this promise to myself, that would be a really good idea. But I'm beginning to really think a lot about how it's a good idea in life not to break promises with yourself. Like I think that really over time kind of erodes your self-esteem. And I don't know if I was talking to you at this before, but I heard someone say that if you had a friend who broke promises with you all the time, you just wouldn't trust them at all. Like you'd kind of a little bit be rolling your eyes when they made declarations about being fond of you or being there for you. And they were talking about like the difference between self-love and self-respect. And they were talking about how self-respect is trusting yourself.
And yeah, I mean, I really grapple with this too, is the balance of balance is a key thing that I think I struggle with. But the
Ironic for ballerina.
I know. Believe me, I know. But yeah, like the balance of finding self-compassion, but not so much self-compassion where it's like coddling. You know what I mean? Like, because I could so see a friend, like it's always the idea of like, what would you say to a friend? Like that's totally, I 100% agree with that. And that's why I'm like very strict with myself and almost too harsh on myself, because it's like, well, I don't want to be the flaky friend to myself. You know, I can't flake out on myself. I don't want to flake out on other people. I don't want to flake out on myself. But I could also totally see if a friend came to me and was like, someone just passed away in my life, and I have to move out of the apartment that I have loved for 2 years, and there's just like pure chaos going on in their world. I could totally see being like, girl, it's okay. Like there's going to be some things that need to come off of your plate for a little while. So I could so see that being right in to a degree too. So it's just again that balance of like, when is it self-compassionate to be like, I'm doing too much, I've gotta like just take a little breather, and when is it, when am I using that, or when are other people using that to be like, but I don't want to do this anymore.
I also think a lot of the, like, when I think about the promises thing, there's two sides to that. It's like, first of all, don't break the promise. But in order to not break the promise, you also have to not make promises that you can't keep. I didn't, for a long time, I didn't really understand my capability. So I would consistently promise myself that I was going to do things that I just fundamentally could not do. Like, I'd be really sick, but I'd be having like a good couple of days and I'd like do a nice yoga practice. And then I'd be like, I'm going to do this every day for the next 6 months. But like a day would come 3 days later when I couldn't get out of bed. Like, why was I making that promise to myself?
Right.
But I would really believe it in the moment. And so I feel like in general, I've probably broken more resolutions than I've kept. I think we all possibly have, but I feel like for me, it's I make them and I'm so wildly obsessed with them, and then I so profoundly don't do them. And often what I've promised myself is a little self-destructive, but I think it's self-care. Like it gets kind of complicated with the illness stuff. And so I'm really trying to think exactly what you're saying about that balance of like, the compassionate thing is to keep my promises, but the compassionate thing is also when I feel like making a promise for myself, just to side eye myself and be like, do I want to do that though?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is like there's showing up, and then there's having like, and then there's being harsh on yourself when you show up. So I think for me, it's like, I would not be feeling any better if I hadn't shown up to my project, my writing this week. Like, I am really glad that I kept trying to do it and that I showed up every day. I'm proud of that. But I'm also like, I wish I could be nicer to myself about the fact that when I did show up, I wasn't very clever. Like, I think it's so okay to be like, you're struggling, you're having an off week. Naturally, you may not have the most beautiful poetic things to say. And all you have to do on a bad week is just not give up. It's just keep trying. Similarly, like, you know, like, you've having a rough week, you're here, but it's okay if like you're not feeling the grooviest, you're not wearing your tiara, you're not in full fabulous mode. I think that what's scary, maybe, actually, I'd love to hear what you think about this, because there was a question in the questions about being kinder to yourself. And I wonder sometimes if it's harder to show up because, you know, like, if we were less self-critical, would it be easier for us to show up in these moments when we know we're not going to show up super well?
I definitely am a perfectionist if I don't keep myself in check. Maybe I shouldn't say it like that, because I don't want to identify as being a perfectionist necessarily, but you know, I have been known to exhibit perfectionistic tendencies. I have told myself for a very long time that if it's not going to be done right, then it's not worth doing at all. And now I am definitely shifting that mindset of, you know what, actually, it's just better to keep going no matter what. And I'm showing up today. My hair is unwashed. I am an absolute mess. I am a little bit lower energy than I normally might be. I have, like, you know, a million ulcers in my mouth from my freaking wisdom tooth. So it's hard for me to speak, but I'm here. And it was really important for me to do that because I made that commitment to you and I made that commitment to myself. And in the past, though, I totally would have been like, I'm not showing up on camera today. Like, I'm not doing that. I can't do it. And then I would have flaked out, and then I would have felt the guilt of flaking out and it's just like, I honestly feel like it was actually, even though my brain told me, hey, it's easier to just be like, this isn't working right now. Even though my brain told me that, now that I'm here, I actually feel like it's just easier to be here. Because then I don't have to deal with the ripple effect of everything that comes after not showing up. But that was such a critical mindset to make. And in regard to the questions that we had to answer, and I remember I was journaling on this idea of like, I think of myself as my own boss, and I am kind of like a pretty mean boss. Like, I don't allow myself guilt-free time to recover. I expect so much of myself that's almost not even like realistically feasible. And then I get mad at myself and I berate myself when I don't accomplish those things. So kind of like what you were saying before, where it's like, we'll both take this stuff on our plate that we know we're not going to be able to finish, and then be admonishing ourselves like, why didn't you finish that? And I think it's so easy to get caught in the extremes, right? Where it's like,
Yes.
you should always be pushing forward, and then you should always be like squirreling away more and more work, so that way when you have an inevitable situation like this, it's like, well, I earned it, which we've talked about before, our need to like earn things and whatever. But there's also the other idea where it's like, I think because a lot of my thinking is very black and white and extreme sometimes, it's almost like I always have this feeling where if I allow myself rest and recovery and all of those things that I know are vital to a creative practice, it's like I don't want to do it because I'm afraid I'm going to get stuck there. It's like, why can't I just be like, I will work a normal amount and then I will rest a normal amount? It's either like I'm working myself to death or I'm so lazy and burnt out that I just don't care about anything.
I'm thinking now when you were talking about that whole idea of like getting stuck out of, like losing your momentum, it made me think of like, when things get really busy and you don't see a friend for like months and you just like lose contact with each other, and we all have those friends where it's like amazing, we can fall out of contact for like months and then like see each other and it's like no time has passed. But
Yeah.
in general, as I've gotten older and like more and more in life, you have friends from different areas of your life that you don't see that often. Like you don't see your school friends that often, or people live in different cities. And I've been trying to be like, if I can't spend quality time with someone, like for a long stretch of time, because that happens in life, like just watering that friendship a little bit, just like giving it something can go such a long way.
Mm.
So like even just like I don't have time to like call this person, or we have a weird time difference or whatever, but just like sending each other the occasional TikTok can often like keep just the occasional meme, the occasional little picture of our food can like keep the friendship going until we're next able to have that quality moment together. And I feel a little bit like that in some ways with creativity, of like, maybe I can sit down and do something really intentional and really beautiful and really heartfelt in this moment. But if I just show up, even if I just acknowledge the project, like if I just go to it and give it a couple of words or give it a little edit or just read it over every day, like I can keep it ticking over and I can keep that momentum going. I can keep feeding it until I'm able to functionally actually go back to it with my heart. But if I ignore it, when I go back to it, we might not know each other anymore.
Yeah, that it's that feeling of, is this going to be awkward? Like, I feel like to use the friend analogy, it's almost like sometimes then you avoid it even more because it's like, I don't
Exactly.
even know who this person is anymore. Like, what are they going to think of me? What am I going to think of them? Like, is it going to be awkward?
Mm.
What are we even going to talk about? When in reality, there's likely so much to talk about because there's so much time has passed, but it's like the discomfort of having to get over that not great, like the sticky feeling, but then when you move past it, it's totally fine. But I also love the terminology you used of like watering it, because that's really
Mm.
what it is. It's like that is evocative of like nourishment and growth, and like it's such a perfect word because it's so true. That's what it requires. It doesn't require these long stretches of like, and we're going to be an oak tree tomorrow, but you've got to keep watering it to get that
Mm.
payoff.
Maybe it's not the project that's my friend in this analogy. Maybe it's like my creative self. I think Julia Cameron does a great job in this course of like making you think of your artist as like a facet of your personality. And it's like, maybe it's just that daily acknowledgement of like, I don't know if the artist can do much today, but she has to show up. So I have to like have a moment in the day where I'm like, hello, artist. Hello, creative self. We still know each other. We're still chatting. Here's a little joke I heard. Okay, bye now. If that's all you could come out for, that's fine. But you had to come out today. Otherwise, I would forget what you look like.
I have personally found this line of thinking to be productive and helpful for me, and it
Mm.
doesn't work for everybody. But when bad things are happening, sometimes I do find it helpful to say, how is this happening for me? Because, like, for example, to take myself as an example, I may or may not have to move. I don't necessarily want to. It's very uprooting. It's in a way devastating because this is my home, and
Mm.
I don't want to leave my home. But it could also be that we get into a new place and it is like the best thing ever, and it's so much better, and it like allows all these other things to flourish. So I could sit here and be just lost in, I don't want to do this and why is this happening and da 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 da, or I can be like, how is this happening for me?
Such a great illustration. Even what you were saying about the moving house and like the next house could be an even better home. I think for me, that is like exactly the difference between wishing and hoping. Like,
Yeah.
like, but I also think like where I'm at now is like and this week beginning to think more about like that both of them might be valid. Like maybe the hoping is more wise than the wishing, and maybe it's a more healthy mindset, and maybe that's where you have to land. But I've been thinking a lot about how the wishing part's really important too, because that's a like that's your anger, and that's your I also think like I've heard people say that like your anger is a really beautiful part of yourself because it's a very
Mhm.
compassionate part. It's the part that loves you enough to want better for you. If you go through anger to acceptance, it's like you've heard your rage, you've acknowledged what you deserve, or the way you would like to be treated, and then you've made peace. But if you try to get rid of the anger and just go straight to the acceptance, it's not what you think it is. It's not the full healthy beautiful acceptance. It's like you're just denying what you deserve. I think my hashtag toxic trait has been historically like, and I think this is so relevant to our like flop era theme, is like trying to get to that enlightened place without going through the reads. So like
Mm.
I did make a video about this last or a few Octobers ago when me and my partner were doing this Inktober thing, and I'll link it in the description. At every phase in my life, I tried to be smart. I tried to outsmart it. So like when I was like a teenager, I knew it was cliched for teenagers to like be insecure and to be self-involved and to be stroppy and hormonal and all those kind of things. And I was like, I'm too clever to be a teenager. I'm 14 years old, but I'm going to be like too mature to have any 14-year-old feelings or 14-year-old emotions. I don't want to be a cliche. And I always thought I was like being so wise, and everyone always said I was so mature. But then later on, I kind of realized that like I'd actually skipped important growing phases, and I had to actually be a very immature privately like later on, so that I could work through all of that. It was all these things like that my friends are going through, and I was like, oh, I'm so wise, I'm so mature. And then later on I was like, oh, like when they were having their like drama, and I was being like, oh, they're having drama, they were actually like learning like conflict resolution. Like they were going through important learning phases, and now they have the wisdom that they earned. And I had like wisdom that like, yeah, I was probably a little bit mature to know that that's where we were going, but I didn't actually get there authentically. And I think often I try to jump straight to the acceptance. I try to jump straight to the wisdom before
Yeah.
I've learned the lesson, and then I get a bit stuck because I don't really know it. And so I think having the humility and the vulnerability to like sit in a flop, and to wish and to be like, this is bad and I don't like this and this isn't right and I'm not happy about this, and I'm going to feel these like ugly emotions that I don't like to think of myself as having, like despair and anger and confusion and doubt, and to actually just let those things sing out and to ask yourself questions and ask questions to those emotions. It's like you're letting yourself be 14 when you're supposed to be 14, so that you can be 15 when you're 15, so that you can just go through it when you're supposed to. And that's to quote, wisdom teeth theme, like that's the wise thing. You don't have to in life be smarter than you need to be. Like you're allowed to just learn from experience. You're allowed to be in the phase that you're currently in. And so like if you're young, you're allowed to be immature. If you're bereaved, you're allowed to just be in grief. You don't have to already know what's 5 steps down the road. And I think like we read widely, we listen to a lot of podcasts, we're trying to like master the school of life, but it's okay sometimes to just like let it teach us.
Yeah. I love everything that we indulge in to better our lives and to grow and allow our creativity to flourish and not be shit human beings, which is great. And like I totally want to master the school of life, but it just like reminds me of that quote where it's like sometimes I think mastering the school of life is not mastering it. Like,
Yeah.
just totally acknowledging it's like, I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know what's what. I don't know my up from my down, but I'm here and I'm doing it and I'm showing up. And like, it's funny. I just keep saying to Jeff, my husband, like, as shit as life feels right now, I can't help but also kind of love it. Like, I feel
Mm.
so happy. Like, doing this podcast with you brings me so much joy. Even though things are a little topsy turvy, like, I'm still living and dancing in New York, which is what I've always wanted to do. I love my relationship with my husband. Like, there is so much where I'm like, you know what? Yeah, like it doesn't have to all be like it's either the flop era or it's the everything era.
Exactly.
It's
Yes.
like, there it's compartmentalized and it's like I love this part of my life. This part could use a little work, but it is what it is. And also, it is interesting that you're going through such a hard week because you also mentioned to me that you have a really great accomplishment that happened to you.
We'd been talking about style. Beginning of this podcast, I was dressing like Fran Lebowitz 24/7. Like I was in my, I was just wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling playful at all. My partner came home and was like, saw a job opportunity posted, like to be the social media manager for this like ethical fashion companies. I did get it. I did get the role, which is very exciting. But also, it was so interesting because I had this moment of like there were so many little things always going on that I was doing just following curiosity. Um, that then kind of like when I got this and the person was like, "Oh, you're so qualified for this," I was like, right, because all of those things that I've been doing, learning cinematography and even just like my taste in clothes, which I suppose has been developing as well, and like all of these different things. Like even though I never knew what I was doing them for, like it's interesting when someone asks, like, "Hey, does anyone here know how to do this?" And you realize you have the skill set you didn't know you have, and it is kind of encouraging because those cinematography skills and those videography skills are all little hacks and skills I hobbled together during various flop eras. I mean, my entire video career is built on the like blood-soaked rock of the world's worst flop era. So like
I think it's interesting. I mean, I don't know what like your formal education journey has been like. Mine has been an absolute mess.
not much.
Yeah. If you want to talk about the blood-soaked rock of
Yeah.
but like yeah, that's my education journey. From dropping out of baking and pastry art school to briefly going to music school to now being in
Yeah,
dance.
I learned about your pastry chef like misspent youth on like one of your Instagram stories like 3 days ago, and I was just like, this girl is literally full of surprises. You have like 16 origin stories. It's never not the craziest shit.
I feel like I've lived like 28 different lives in a span of
You
like
have.
4 years. Yeah, so that was kind of a wild cookie filled ride. But where was I going with this? Oh, right. So I think it's like when I don't know, like I have some friends who are like doctors or lawyers or like people
Mhm.
who are like, this is the place I wanted to end up. And so I did this and this and this and this and this. And now I ended up here. And I'm not saying that it wasn't super challenging for them and that they didn't
Mm.
go through their own like struggles with the intensity of everything that they had to do. But it, at least from an outside perspective, it seemed like their path was a bit more like straightforward. Like, if you
Mhm.
want to get to Z, you start at A and go through all the letters. And I feel like my journey has been like, I started at A, and then it's like, I was at X, and then I was at Q, and then I was at R, and then I was at 12. Like, it was just
Mm.
very like, all over the place. And I think when you feel like that, it's easy to, and when you're very like self-taught with a lot of different things, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I mean, I'm underqualified because I don't have this formal education, or I don't have that, or I don't know. But like, I know how to build websites because I just do it for fun. I know how to manage social media. I know how to film, edit. I know how to, like there's lots of little
Mm.
things that to a lot of people are very valuable skills. And I know that you have those skills too. I just think it's like because we've both been like cobbling together all the little elements of our creative journey, it's like, is this what you want? I guess.
Yeah. But it's so beautiful then when someone like is like impressed in some way with your skills, or thinks you have unique skills, or wants to employ you for your skills, because you're kind of like, there was no moment where like you passed the exam and you were like, cool, now I have that qualification. So,
Right.
but it just kind of like, it was just this lovely encouraging thing of like, you're going the right direction. Stuff kind of does make sense.
You were more ready than you gave yourself credit for. And like when things have happened to me like that in my life, it's just always made me realize more and more as I go through this journey is, maybe I don't necessarily need the permission from other people to be like, oh, okay, now I'm worthy. Like we talked
Yes.
about in the first episode, or like, we've been talking about, is like, I needed that validation for someone to be like, okay, you're a ballerina now, you're a dancer now, and you may join us on Mount Olympus. And it's like, well, I am never going to get that because it's too late for like that part of my journey where I would go through like the formal training that, you're not welcome in anymore once you're like
Mm.
17. So I'm not going to get that anymore, but I don't care. I don't need that permission from anybody else because I am ready, and it's already there inside of me. I'm already doing the work. And it's nice when that's acknowledged. Like this job for you is sort of an acknowledgement of all of the work that you've been doing, but it's already there in you. You've already done that work. And
Mm.
whether someone else appreciated it enough to give you a job or not, it's like you already are valid and worthy and all of those things because you've done it. Like you've earned your dues.
Like, just like there are actual obstacles all the time.
Right.
And the thing I have to keep reminding myself of, and it's a very like it's motivating thought for me when I'm find myself being very like critical or self-critical or doubtful, is like, you have actual barriers. You cannot afford to be your own barrier. You have to be so the opposite of a barrier, because there are like, don't worry, there'll be other barriers. Like, you don't have to be the guy who's causing yourself problems. You have problems.
It just makes me think like sometimes if shit is going down, like, my partner is my best friend in the universe. Like I
Yeah.
freaking love my husband. And sometimes when shit is going down, we are at that point, we've been together for so long where it's like we don't even have to say anything. I can just kind of like give him a little nudge under the table, and like he just already knows what I'm
Mhm.
thinking, where it's like, are you experiencing this? Like, do you understand? And we're in on it together. And so that's kind of the relationship that I almost want to have with myself. Like when life is getting crazy, I don't want a
Yes.
crazy maker, as Julia Cameron would refer to it as. Like, I don't want a crazy maker coming in and being like, oh my God, did you see how crazy this was? And da, 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 what are we gonna do? And you know what? You didn't even do this right. And da, da, da. It's like I'd rather
Mm.
be on my own team and kicking myself under the table, like, are you seeing this shit? What are we gonna do about that? And it's just like this level of like, no matter what happens, I know Jeff and I have got this together. So why can't I give myself that same respect of like, I have my own back? It doesn't matter how crazy things get outside of this inner relationship. We've got each other. We're in this together. It's gonna be good.
Mm.
Such always such great uplifting energy after this. Like I leave these podcasts and I'm like, okay, what are we making today?
Yeah. Yeah, no, this, and I'm so glad. I mean, it's just such an example of like the beauty of showing up even when you're having a rough time.
My gosh, me too. And you know what? Like we're here, we're winding down, and we freaking did it. And I know I'm jumping right back into my chaotic world, and you're
Mm-hmm.
jumping back into everything you're facing, but like I feel better equipped for it. So I think that's the power of this.
Yeah, and I also
The
feel
power of
like it's been
possibility.
acknowledged. Yeah, and also like it's nice to think that, like, I don't know, this was such a nice vibe for me, and I hope the people watching it at home, I
Yeah.
don't know why I said that, we're both also at home, like can kind of bogart this nice little gentle vibe. Like, why am I talking like we're in a studio when it's the 50s? The kids at home.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Art Therapy. The course we are following is based on the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. If you would like to continue to follow us on this journey, you can find us every week for 12 weeks straight, alternating between Veronica's channel, Veronica Vicora, and my channel, The Prime of Life. You can also click here to gain access to the full playlists of episodes in order. Links to our channels, as well as our various other outlets and to the Artist's Way book in both audio and PDF form, can be found in the description. Until next time, sending love.